All right, let's unpack this. If you're jumping into the updated 2024 rules for Dungeons and Dragons, whether you're a veteran player or brand new, you know that getting a handle on the rule book can feel like learning a new language.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's exactly what we're tackling today, the fundamental vocabulary, the very language the game speaks.
Think about it. Every spell, every monster ability, every magical item, every environmental effect, they all rely on specific words having very precise meanings.
Yeah.
If you don't know exactly what restrained or concentration or heavily obscured means according to the rulebook, you're going to have a hard time understanding how anything actually works. It gets confusing fast.
Absolutely. And our deep dive today is laser focused on the most foundational source for that language, Appendix C, the Rules Glossary, taken directly from the updated 2024 rulebook. This is the game defining its own terms, and understanding it is your shortcut to confidence at the table.
Our mission is, well, ambitious, but essential. We're going to unpack every single term and concept presented in this glossary. We're going word by word, definition by definition, making sure we understand the bedrock of these rules.
That's the plan.
By the end, you should feel much more comfortable reading any part of the rulebook, knowing exactly what it means when it uses these words.
And before we dive into the terms themselves, the glossary gives us a few handy conventions to note. First, you'll see terms sometimes followed by something in brackets, like action, condition, hazard, or attack action. What are those telling us?
They're essentially type tags. They quickly tell you what kind of game element you're looking at. Action means it's one of the standard actions you can take on your turn.
Okay.
Condition signifies it's one of the debilitating or sometimes enhancing states a creature can be in. Hazard lets you know it's an environmental danger. It's just a quick visual cue to categorize the term.
Gotcha. They also clarify that when the rules use the word you, they are always referring to your character within the game world.
Right.
Not you, the person sitting there, but your brave adventurer facing down a dragon.
Right. Unless the text is explicitly addressing the player or the dungeon master, you is your character. They also mention that the game's rules is a frequent reference, typically used when describing effects or interactions that happen to your character within the game.
There's a list of common abbreviations provided as well, like AC for armor class, HP for hit points, DC for difficulty class. Getting familiar with those will speed up your reading elsewhere in the book.
Definitely helps. And a crucial note that sets the stage for these 2024 rules. No obsolete terms. This glossary contains definitions of current rules terms only.
Ah, good point.
If you're looking for a term or concept from a previous edition of D&D, you won't find its definition here. This is purely the language of the updated rule set.
So whether you're crafting a character, planning your moves in combat, or trying to understand a monster's abilities, knowing these terms is the absolute foundation. This glossary is the key to speaking the same game language at the table. Let's get started.
Ready when you are.
All right, kicking off with some core mechanics and character basics. The fundamental numbers and concepts that define your character. First up, ability check.
An ability check is one of the 3 primary types of D20 tests you'll make in the game. It's how you determine success or failure when your character attempts to overcome a challenge that relates to one of their 6 core abilities: strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, or charisma.
So, trying to force open a stuck door, convincing a guard you belong here, remembering some ancient lore, those are all ability checks.
Precisely. Mechanically, making an ability check involves rolling a d20.
Okay.
To that roll, you add the modifier of the ability score relevant to the challenge. If your character is proficient in a skill associated with that ability, like strength athletics for the door or charisma persuasion for the guard, you also add your proficiency bonus.
Right. The proficiency bonus comes in if you're trained.
Exactly. The rules for ability checks are covered more broadly in Chapter 1, as are the details of D20 tests and proficiency.
Speaking of abilities, next is ability score and modifier. What's the relationship there?
Every creature in the game has 6 ability scores: strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. These are raw numerical representations of the creature's capabilities, typically ranging from, 1 to 30 for most creatures.
And the modifier's key.
Crucially, yes. Each score has a corresponding modifier. This modifier is the number you'll actually add to most D20 tests.
And how do you calculate that modifier again?
The standard calculation is, take the ability score, subtract 10, and then divide the result by 2, rounding down any fractions.
Okay, so 10 or 11 is plus 0.
Right. A strength of 12 or 13 gives you a plus 1. A strength of 18 or 19 gives you a plus 4. And conversely, a score of 8 or 9 gives you a -1 modifier.
It's the modifier that really drives the mechanics. You're adding that modifier to ability checks, attack rolls, and saving throws whenever the corresponding ability or a skill linked to it is called for.
Yeah. Chapter 1 dedicates a whole section to the 6 abilities, so there's plenty more detail there if you need it.
Moving on to something that shapes a character's identity. Alignment.
Alignment is described as a broad descriptor of a creature's ethical attitudes and ideals. It combines 2 distinct factors.
2 axes, right.
The first factor defines a creature's morality, choosing from good, evil, or neutral. Good creatures generally value life and freedom. Evil creatures disrespect or destroy those things. And neutral creatures either lack strong moral convictions or seek a balance.
And the second factor?
The second factor describes a creature's attitude towards society and order, choosing from lawful, chaotic, or neutral. Lawful creatures value rules, traditions, organization. Chaotic creatures value freedom, unpredictability, individualism. Neutral creatures are less concerned with strict rules or their absence.
And combining these 2 gives you the standard 9 alignments.
Exactly. Lawful good, lawful neutral, lawful evil, neutral good, true neutral on both axes, neutral evil, chaotic good, chaotic neutral, and chaotic evil.
Does it have much mechanical impact these days?
Well, its direct mechanical impact on player characters is less pronounced in these rules compared to some past versions, definitely. But it can still be relevant. Certain spells or monster abilities might specifically target or interact with creatures of a particular alignment.
And it's a role-playing guide, too.
For sure. It serves as a strong role-playing guideline. Chapter 2 on creating your character discusses alignment further.
Let's talk combat essentials. Armor class, AC. What's the simplest way to think about it?
AC is the defensive target number. When an attack roll is made against a creature or object, that roll must meet or exceed the target's AC for the attack to successfully hit. It's a measure of how difficult you are to strike effectively.
So higher AC means you're harder to hit.
Precisely. The baseline calculation for AC, if you're not wearing armor, is 10 plus your dexterity modifier.
Just 10 plus dex, okay.
However, this changes significantly if you are wearing armor, using a shield, or have natural armor from your race or monster type. The crucial rule here is that you can only benefit from one AC calculation source at a time.
Ah, only one.
Yes. If you're wearing plate armor, you use the AC calculation provided by the plate armor, ignoring the 10 plus stacks. If you have a magical ring that gives you a different AC calculation, you choose which one to use. You don't stack them.
That clarifies it. Armor replaces the base calculation. It doesn't stack with it. Good to know. The glossary cross-references attack roll and Chapter 6 on armor, and tied to armor is armor training.
Armor training is a proficiency. It determines whether your character knows how to wear armor of a certain category, light, medium, or heavy, or use a shield without facing significant penalties.
And most classes give you some training.
Exactly. Most classes grant training in specific types of armor.
What happens if you, say, find some cool plate mail, but your wizard isn't trained in heavy armor?
Bad news for the wizard. If you wear armor you lack training with, you suffer disadvantage on any D20 test that uses strength or dexterity.
Ouch, that's attacks, checks, saves.
Yep, all of them using strength or dex. Furthermore, wearing armor you aren't trained in prevents you from casting spells.
Whoa, okay. No spells at all.
Correct. Now, the penalty for using a shield you aren't trained in is similar disadvantage on strength and dexterity D20 tests, but it doesn't prevent spell casting. Still bad, but slightly less catastrophic for a caster.
Right. Highlights the importance of sticking to what you're trained in. The entry links to disadvantage and Chapter 6 on armor.
Logistics next. Carrying capacity. How much can your character lug around?
Always a fun one to track. Or ignore.
Well, your character's size and strength score determine the maximum weight they can carry. But it also sets limits on how much they can drag, lift, or push.
Is it just tied to strength? The glossary seems to show a table based on size.
That's an interesting point in the source. While strength modifier usually relates to athletics checks for lifting or pushing, the glossary here lists a specific maximum carrying capacity per size category. It implies a baseline carrying strength inherent just to your size, separate from maybe push-drag limits, which might involve strength more directly.
Interesting. Let's break down that table, though.
Okay. For tiny creatures, the carrying capacity is 7.5 pounds, and they can drag or push up to 15 pounds.
Tiny, like a sprite or a familiar.
Exactly. Small and medium creatures, that's most PCs, like humans, elves, dwarves, halflings, are grouped together. Both have a carrying capacity of 15 pounds and able to drag push up to 30 pounds.
Wait, only 15 pounds carry capacity for a medium creature. That seems really low. Are we sure that's not encumbrance or something different? Usually it's strength score times 15 pounds.
You're right, that 15-pound figure for medium does seem unusually low compared to typical D&D rules. Let me recheck the source description.
Ah, okay. The source description I was given does list 15 pounds for small medium carry. That's odd. Traditionally, carrying capacity is strength score by 15 pounds, and push drag lift is double that. This glossary entry might be simplifying or representing a different calculation method for the 2024 rules, or maybe the source notes were slightly off. Let's proceed with what's written in the source notes provided, but acknowledge this seems like a significant departure if accurate. Okay, noted. That's a potentially huge change. So, proceeding with the provided numbers.
Large creatures.
Large creatures can carry 30 pounds and drag push 60 pounds.
Like an ogre.
Yep. Huge creatures are much stronger, carrying up to 60 pounds and dragging pushing 120 pounds.
The giants, maybe.
Could be. And gargantuan creatures, the largest category, can carry 120 pounds and drag push 240 pounds.
That's still surprisingly low based on traditional rules, but very standardized per size, according to this glossary entry. What happens if you exceed that limit while dragging, lifting, or pushing?
If the total weight you are dragging, lifting, or pushing exceeds your maximum carrying capacity as listed on that table, your speed immediately becomes 0. Just stops you cold.
Yep. You are simply incapable of moving under that much strain. Crucial rule for heavy objects.
Good to know you can't just drag a castle door if it's over your capacity, regardless of your strength roll. Okay, essential record-keeping item. The character sheet.
The character sheet. Your central hub of information. It's the paper or digital record used to track all the statistics, proficiencies, features, equipment, and history of your player character.
Your character's life on paper.
Pretty much. It's your character's identity translated into game terms. Chapter 2, which details character creation, is naturally where this is most relevant.
How about hit point dice, or just hit dice?
Hit dice are resources you can use during a short rest to recover hit points. Every creature has a maximum number of hit dice, typically equal to their character level for player characters, or listed in their stat block for monsters.
And you use them during a short rest.
Correct. When you take a short rest, you can choose to spend one or more of your available hit dice. The number you spend can't exceed your maximum, of course.
How does the healing work?
For each hit die you spend, you roll that specific die. The type depends on your class, like a D6 for wizards, D10 for fighters. Add your constitution modifier to the result, and you regain that many hit points.
And you get them back after a long rest.
Yes, you typically regain half your maximum number of hit dice, rounded up, when you finish a long rest. This lets you use them again after more recovery. The glossary cross-references Chapter 2 and short rest.
The main thing, hit dice help regain hit points, HP.
Hit points are the most direct measure of a creature's resilience and vitality. They represent how much punishment a creature or object can withstand before being defeated or destroyed.
Simple enough. Damage reduces HP, healing restores HP.
Exactly.
And the most critical point, what happens at 0 HP?
If a creature's hit points drop to 0 and it doesn't immediately regain any, it typically dies or is destroyed.
Though players get death saves, usually.
Right. The rules for player characters falling unconscious at 0 HP and making death saving throws are an important exception to this general rule, detailed elsewhere. Also, a creature cannot have hit points exceeding its maximum hit point total. This entry also links to the rules for breaking objects and the section on damage and healing in Chapter 1.
Finally, for this initial section, the core unit we play as, player character.
Simple but essential definition. A player character, or PC, is any character in the game world that is controlled by a player, as opposed to a creature controlled by the Dungeon Master, which would be a monster or NPC.
Got it. Chapter 2 reference as expected. Okay, that gives us a solid foundation in character basics and stats. Now, let's talk about how characters interact with the world and with each other during encounters. Starting with the fundamental unit of action on your turn. Action.
Action. On your turn in combat, you typically have one action you can take. This action is chosen from a specific list of standard actions available to most creatures, or it could be a special action granted by your class features, spells, or specific items you're using.
What are the standard actions listed in the glossary? These are the core verbs of combat. Yeah.
Exactly. The glossary lists attack, dash, disengage, dodge, help, hide, influence magic, ready, search, study, and utilize.
That's a good list.
These are the options generally available to everyone, though specific circumstances might make some impossible or unnecessary. Each of these is defined elsewhere in the glossary, or in more detail in Chapter 1, under Actions.
Let's dive into some of those specific actions, starting with the most common. Attack. Attack action.
When you take the attack action, you are making an attempt to hit a target with either a weapon you are wielding or an unarmed strike using your body.
Simple attack, roll to hit.
Right. This requires making an attack roll, which we'll discuss later. Some features, like a fighter's extra attack, allow you to make more than one attack when you take the attack action, but the action itself is still called attack.
Then there's the bonus action. Bonus action. This is different because you don't always have one.
That's right. A bonus action is a special type of action that you might be able to take on the same turn as your regular action. The key constraint is that you can only take a bonus action if a specific rule or feature explicitly grants you the ability to do so.
Can't just declare something a bonus action.
No, afraid not. You can't just choose to do anything as a bonus action. It has to be granted by the rules.
And there's a limit.
Yes, you are limited to taking only one bonus action per turn, even if multiple rules grant you different options for a bonus action. You have to choose just one. This is also detailed in Chapter 1 under Actions.
All right, back to the standard actions list. Dash action.
Taking the dash action is purely about maximizing your movement for the current turn. When you dash, you gain extra movement equal to your speed after applying any modifiers or reductions.
So if my speed is 30 feet and I dash, I can move up to 60 feet this turn.
Correct. It effectively allows you to move up to double your normal speed, provided you use your action to do so. It's a straightforward way to cover more distance, maybe to reach a far-off enemy or escape danger.
Links to speed, which we'll get to. Okay. Disengage action is about getting out of sticky situations.
It is. If you take the disengage action, your movement for the rest of your current turn does not provoke opportunity attacks.
Super important in melee.
Absolutely vital if you are engaged in melee combat with an enemy and want to move away without them getting a free attack as you leave their reach. Without disengage, moving away from a creature within your reach almost always triggers an opportunity attack.
That can save you a lot of hit points. How about dodge action?
The dodge action is purely defensive. When you dodge, you gain 2 key benefits until the start of your next turn. Any attack roll made against you has disadvantage.
Making you harder to hit.
Right, and you have advantage on dexterity saving throws.
Good for dodging fireballs and traps.
Exactly. It's a way to hunker down, make yourself harder to hit, and more agile in avoiding effects you can react to.
Help action lets you assist an ally. How does that work mechanically?
You can use the help action to aid an ally in one of 2 main situations. First, with an ability check. If your ally attempts an ability check before the start of your next turn, and you are within 5 feet of them and proficient in the skill or tool they are using...
Okay, you need to be close and know what you're doing.
Precisely. Then they gain advantage on that check.
Like giving a boost over a wall or whispering helpful advice.
Exactly. Second, with an attack roll. If your ally makes an attack roll against a creature that is within 5 feet of you, the target of the attack has to be near you before the start of your next turn. They gain advantage on that attack roll.
So, distracting the enemy or pointing out a weak spot?
Got it. The DM gets final say, though.
Always. The DM always has the final say on whether your attempt to help is viable and makes sense in the context.
Makes sense. Hide action is about concealment.
The hide action is your attempt to conceal yourself from creatures that might perceive you. To make a hide attempt, you typically need to be heavily obscured or have at least 3/4 cover or total cover from the creatures you're hiding from.
Need some cover or darkness first.
Right. You then make a DC 15 dexterity stealth check.
A fixed DC 15. Interesting.
That's what's listed here, yes. A flat DC 15 check.
And success means you're hidden. Yes. If successful, you are considered out of the enemy's line of sight. They can still try to find you, perhaps by listening or searching actively. To find you, they would typically need to make a wisdom perception check, contested by your successful stealth check result.
So they roll perception against your earlier stealth roll.
Correct. This action is linked to heavily obscured, cover, line of sight, and the invisible condition, as being hidden shares some benefits with being invisible, like attacks against you having disadvantage.
Influence action brings social interaction into the action economy. This seems like a big one.
It is. The influence action is your attempt to affect the disposition or actions of a monster you are actively communicating with. The DM determines the monster's initial attitude towards your character, friendly, hostile, or indifferent, and how receptive they might be to your approach.
And there are different skills for different approaches, like you can't intimidate everyone.
Exactly. The glossary maps specific skills to types of influence checks. Deceiving a monster uses charisma, deception. Intimidating them uses charisma, intimidation. Amusing them uses charisma, performance. Persuading them uses charisma, persuasion.
Okay, those are the main charisma social skills.
Yes. There's also a specific instance listed for gently coaxing a beast or monstrosity, which uses wisdom, animal handling.
Ah, animal handling for beasts makes sense. You roll the appropriate ability check against a DC. How is that DC set?
The Dungeon Master sets the difficulty class for the influence check. The glossary suggests typical DCs between 10 and 15, or sometimes equal to the monster's intelligence score, reflecting how difficult the creature is to influence.
So it depends on the creature and the situation.
Right.
And the outcome.
Right.
What happens if you succeed?
On a successful check, if the monster was willing or hesitant, it might agree to a reasonable request you make. If it was hostile, the successful check might change its attitude towards you, possibly making it indifferent or even friendly.
How long does that last?
The effect usually lasts for 24 hours, or until the DM determines the situation changes significantly.
And if you fail?
On a failed check, if the monster was hesitant, there's usually no change in his attitude. However, if it was hesitant or unwilling, failing the check might cause the monster to become hostile towards you, potentially starting combat. So there's risk involved.
Definitely. A failed persuasion could lead to a fight. This action is linked back to attitude. Okay, that covers the standard actions. Let's look at the flow of combat with initiative.
Initiative is the mechanic that determines the turn order during combat. It's typically rolled at the very beginning of a combat encounter.
How is it calculated? D20 plus Dex.
That's a standard, yes. Each combatant rolls initiative. Calculation is rolling a d20 and adding your dexterity modifier. Creatures with higher initiative totals act earlier in the round.
Does anything affect that roll?
Yes. The glossary notes that advantage and disadvantage rules can affect initiative rolls, just like other d20 tests. For example, certain conditions like being surprised or features might grant you advantage or impose disadvantage on your initiative roll.
Like the incapacitated condition gave disadvantage.
Exactly. Chapter 1 provides a complete breakdown of how combat works, including initiative.
We've had action and bonus action, now the third type, reaction.
A reaction is a special action you can take in response to a specific trigger. Unlike actions and bonus actions, reactions can happen on any creature's turn, not just your own, provided the trigger occurs.
Can I take multiple reactions in a round if 2 enemies run past me?
That's the key limit. You are limited to taking only 1 reaction per round, regardless of how many potential triggers might happen.
1 per round. Got it.
Also, similar to bonus actions, you can only take a reaction if a specific rule, spell, or feature explicitly grants you one or allows you to use your reaction in response to a trigger.
Like an opportunity attack.
Opportunity attack is the most common example, and it's listed here. Chapter 1 covers actions, including reactions.
Ready action is for setting up a specific response, like an ambush.
Sort of, yeah. The ready action allows you to wait for a particular circumstance to occur before you act. When you take the ready action on your turn, you choose 2 things. First, a specific perceivable trigger.
Like if that cultist pulls the lever.
Exactly. And second, the action or spell you want to take in response to that trigger.
So you use your action now to prepare a reaction later.
Correct.
How does it work if you ready a spell? That seems tricky.
It is a bit different. If you choose to cast a spell as your ready action, you cast it normally on your turn, expending the spell slot and any required components. However, you hold the spell's effect in a state of readiness, using your concentration to maintain it.
Ah, concentration is involved.
Yes. When your chosen trigger occurs before the start of your next turn, you can use your reaction to unleash the spell's effect.
What if the trigger doesn't happen, or you lose concentration?
If your concentration is broken before the trigger, or if the trigger simply never happens before your next turn starts, the spell dissipates harmlessly. And importantly, the spell slot is still used up. You don't get it back.
Ew, risky. This mechanic is detailed in Chapter 1 under Actions and linked to concentration.
Okay, the search action is for actively looking for hidden things.
Right. The search action is how you attempt to discern something that is not readily obvious through passive observation. You're actively spending your action looking. The glossary provides examples of what kinds of things you might search for and the appropriate ability check to make.
Let's look at that table. What skills does it mention?
Okay, if you're trying to detect a creature's state of mind, like figuring out if someone's lying, you'd typically use wisdom insight.
Makes sense.
To detect a creature's ailment or determine the cause of death, it's intelligence medicine. For detecting a concealed creature or object, like a hidden trap or someone hiding, It's wisdom, perception.
Perception for finding hidden stuff. Classic.
And if you're searching for tracks or attempting to find food in the wilderness, it's wisdom, survival.
So it's about focusing your attention with a specific goal and skill in mind. It's not just, I search the room. It's more targeted.
Exactly. It's using your action to make a targeted check to find something specific.
Similar to search, there's the study, action. What's this one for?
The study action is focused on gaining or recalling knowledge. It involves making an intelligence check to study either your own memory, a book, a clue you found, or some other source of information about a specific topic.
So this is about hitting the books or racking your brain.
Pretty much. And there's a table mapping skills to knowledge areas here too, focusing on the intelligence skills.
Okay, what are they?
For knowledge about spells, magic items, eldritch symbols, magical traditions, planes of existence, and creature types like elementals, aberrations, constructs, and monstrosities, the skill is intelligence. Arcana.
Arcana for all things magical.
Right. For knowledge about historic events, people, ancient civilizations, wars, and creature types like giants and humanoids, it's intelligence, history.
History for the past and people.
Intelligence investigation is used for knowledge about traps, ciphers, riddles, and gadgetry. More deduction-based.
Investigation for figuring things out.
Intelligence nature covers terrain, flora, weather, and creature types like beasts, dragons, oozes, and plants.
Nature for the natural world.
And intelligence, religion, is for knowledge about deities, religious hierarchies and rites, holy symbols, cults, and creature types like celestials, fiends, and undead.
Religion for the divine and undead. That's a very clear breakdown of how the intelligence skills map to academic or investigative knowledge.
Yeah, it helps differentiate them. Finally, for the standard actions, utilize. Utilize action. This sounds a bit vague.
It's a bit of a catch-all, yeah. The utilize action is for interacting meaningfully with an object or an environmental feature that requires an action to use. Something more complex than just picking something up.
Like pulling a big lever.
Exactly. The glossary gives an example. Drawing a sword is typically part of the attack action itself, a free interaction. But using a lever to open a portcullis, activating a complex machine, or perhaps attempting to disable a trap might require taking the utilize action.
It's for those interactions that aren't simple free object interactions you can do alongside movement or another action.
Precisely. It's any significant interaction with the environment or an object that the DM determines requires your full action.
We mentioned it when discussing reactions. Opportunity attack. The attack you get when someone tries to run away.
That's the one. An opportunity attack is a reaction that you can make against a creature that is moving away from you. The trigger is when a creature uses its movement, its action, or its reaction to leave your reach while you are conscious and not incapacitated.
So if an enemy runs past me or tries to step away from melee...
Yes. You can use your reaction to make one melee attack with a weapon or unarmed strike against that creature.
Does it happen before or after they leave your reach?
Ah, good question. The attack happens before the creature actually leaves your reach.
Okay, so you hit them just as they're trying to bolt.
Exactly, allowing you to potentially stop them or deal damage as they try to retreat. This is a core mechanic for controlling space in combat and is detailed further in Chapter 1.
Let's talk more about movement. Speed. How far can I go?
Your speed defines the maximum distance your creature can move on its turn. This distance can be covered using any combination of the movement types available to you. Walking, crawling, flying, jumping, or swimming.
Some creatures have special speeds, right? Like a climb speed or fly speed?
Yes, some creatures might have a listed burrow speed, climb speed, fly speed, or swim speed in their stat block. If you have one of these special speeds, the cost of moving using that method is often reduced.
How does that work? Like climbing?
For example, normally climbing costs extra movement, 2 feet of movement per 1 foot climbed. But if you have a climb speed, it makes it cost only 1 foot per foot, much faster.
And you can mix and match movement types during your turn. Walk a bit, climb a bit.
Absolutely. You can switch between any movement type you have speed for during your turn as many times as you like, provided you have the physical ability, like something to climb on or open water to swim in.
But the total distance is capped by my speed.
Generally, yes. The total distance you move using all types cannot exceed your speed, unless a special speed increases your overall movement capacity. For example, having a fly speed of 30 feet might mean you can walk 30 feet and fly 30 feet, effectively giving you 60 feet total if used right, depending on how the rules interpret it. Changes to your speed, like from difficult terrain or a spell, typically affect all your movement types unless specified otherwise. Chapter 1 covers movement in combat in detail.
Let's look closer at some of those movement types. Climbing, climb speed.
Right, as we just mentioned. Normally, moving on a vertical surface or across a ceiling costs 1 extra foot of movement for every foot you climb. So it costs 2 feet of movement to cover 1 foot of climbing distance.
But if you have a climb speed...
If a creature has a designated climb speed, however, they can climb at a cost of 1 foot of movement per foot climbed, effectively ignoring the extra cost. Makes a huge difference for spiders or geckos or characters with climbing gear.
Crawling crawl speed?
Crawling is specifically moving while you are prone. Like normal climbing, it costs extra movement, 1 extra foot of movement for every foot crawled, for a total of 2 feet of movement per foot covered.
And usually no special crawl speed to reduce that?
Generally not, no. The glossary simply defines the cost here.
Jumping covers both horizontal and vertical leaps. How far can you jump?
Right. A long jump is a horizontal leap, and a high jump is a vertical leap. For a long jump, you can cover a distance up to your strength score in feet horizontally. So a strength 16 character can long jump up to 16 feet.
Needs a running start though, right?
Typically, yes. To achieve your full distance, you usually need to move at least 10 feet immediately before the jump as a running start. If you jump without that running start, your maximum horizontal distance is halved.
So 8 feet for that strength 16 character without a run-up. And the high jump.
For a high jump, you can leap upward a distance in feet equal to 3, plus your strength modifier.
Modifier, not score.
Right. So that's strength 16 character plus 3 modifier. It can high jump 3 plus 3 equals 6 feet. Like the long jump, you usually need at least 10 feet of movement immediately before the jump for a running start, and the distance is halved without it.
Can you reach higher than your jump height?
Yes. You can also extend your high jump height by reaching upwards, adding up to half of your own height to the total height you can reach, like grabbing a ledge.
Are there checks involved with jumping over obstacles?
Yes. The glossary mentions that clearing a low obstacle, shorter than you are tall with a long jump, or grabbing onto a ledge during a high jump might require a DC 10 strength athletics check.
And if you fail?
Failing the check when attempting to clear an obstacle means you hit it and stop. Splat.
Ouch. Swimming swim speed.
Moving through water normally costs extra movement, just like climbing or crawling 1 extra foot of movement per foot, totaling 2 feet per foot covered.
Is there a check sometimes too?
Yes, the DM might also require a DC 15 strength athletics check, depending on the water conditions, like rough currents.
But if you have a swim speed...
If a creature has a dedicated swim speed, they can move through water at a cost of 1 foot per foot, ignoring the extra movement cost and usually avoiding the need for the strength check. Much more efficient in water.
Burrow speed is less common, moving through Earth.
Exactly. Burrow speed is a special movement speed that allows a creature to move through solid matter. The glossary specifies sand, earth, mud, or ice as examples.
Can they go through rock?
An important limitation listed is that a creature with burrow speed typically cannot burrow through solid rock unless their specific trait says they can. So Violettes are fine, but maybe not your average badger.
And fly speed, what's the key rule here?
Fly speed is the speed a creature has for moving through the air. The key rule highlighted here is about falling. If a creature that is flying becomes incapacitated, becomes prone, or if its fly speed is reduced to 0,
they fall.
They immediately fall to the ground. Unless a specific trait or effect prevents it from doing so, like some magical flight abilities might have failsafes.
Good to know. Grounding flying enemies is a solid tactic. Okay, let's talk senses beyond normal vision. Tremor sense. How does this work?
Tremor sense is a non-visual sense based on vibration. It allows a creature to pinpoint the exact location of any creature or object that is moving while in contact with the same surface the creature with tremor sense is on.
So feeling footsteps or movement through the earth, or a wall?
Yes, that surface could be the ground, a wall, or even a ceiling, as long as both creatures are touching it.
What are the limits? Can it see flyers?
No. It doesn't detect creatures or objects that are not in contact with the surface, so flying or swimming creatures are typically invisible to tremor sense. And importantly, it doesn't provide sight. You know where something is, but you don't actually see it.
Blind sight seems much more versatile. Is it like Daredevil senses?
Kind of, yeah. Blind sight is perception that works without relying on sight, within a specified range. Within this range, a creature with blind sight can see anything that isn't behind total cover.
Even invisible things.
Amen.
Or in darkness.
Yes. This includes being able to perceive things normally in conditions like magical darkness, and even being able to see invisible creatures or objects. The area within blind sight range is considered visible to the creature.
Powerful stuff. Dark vision is a common one for many player races. How good is it?
Dark vision allows a creature to see in conditions of darkness as if it were dim light, and in conditions of dim light as if it were bright light, up to a specified range, usually 60 feet.
So it turns pitch black into dim and dim into bright.
Exactly. The important limitation mentioned here is that dark vision usually only perceives in shades of gray. You cannot discern color in darkness using dark vision.
And the most potent vision, true sight. What does this let you see?
True sight grants significantly enhanced vision within a specific range. A creature with true sight can see normally in both normal and magical darkness. It can automatically see invisible creatures and objects.
Sees right through invisibility.
Yep. It also automatically succeeds on saving throws against visual illusions and perceives the true form of creatures or objects that are disguised or under transformation effects like polymorph.
So it cuts through illusions and shape-shifting too. Wow.
And one more thing. It also allows the creature to see into the ethereal plane within that range. It's the ultimate perception ability.
That covers the different ways creatures can perceive the world. Moving on, line of effect, area of effect. This sounds technical.
It's about how area effects originate. Line of effect refers to an area that extends in a straight line from a point of origin. It's determined by the creature or object originating the effect and the specified range and width.
Is the line itself part of the effect?
The glossary notes that the line of effect itself isn't automatically included in the spell's or feature's area of effect unless the creator specifically decides it is. This is often important for effects that originate from you and then cover an area, like maybe a fireball starting point. The line to the area might not be part of the effect itself.
Okay. And related, line of sight. This one's crucial for targeting.
Line of sight is a simpler concept. A straight line extending from your position to a creature or object you want to target or perceive.
What blocks it?
The key thing that blocks line of sight is total cover. If a creature or object is entirely behind something providing total cover from your perspective, you do not have line of sight to it.
Meaning you can't target them with spells or attacks that need sight.
Generally. Correct. Very important for ranged combat and spellcasting.
Okay, that wraps up actions, movement, and senses. Now for the things that can really alter a creature's capabilities, conditions, and environmental hazards. The glossary defines conditions as temporary game states.
Exactly. Conditions impose specific mechanical effects on a creature, altering how they perform actions, interact with the environment, or are affected by other game elements. They're like status effects in a video game. The glossary defines each condition specifically, and they're also listed in Chapter 1.
Let's go through them. Blinded condition. Pretty straightforward.
Mostly. When a creature is blinded, they cannot see. This results in several effects. They automatically fail any ability check that requires sight. Attack rolls they make have disadvantage.
Hard to hit what you can't see.
Right. And importantly, attack rolls made against the blinded creature have advantage. They're easier to hit.
Charmed condition. This one's more social.
Yes. The charmed condition affects a creature's social disposition towards the creature that charmed it, the charmer. While charmed, the creature cannot harm the charmer with any of its abilities or magical effects.
Can't attack the one who charmed you.
Correct. The charmer also has advantage on any ability checks they make to interact socially with the charmed creature, making them easier to influence or deceive.
Deafened condition. Simple loss of hearing.
Simple and direct. A deafened creature cannot hear. This means they automatically fail any ability check that requires hearing.
Exhaustion condition. This one can stack up and be deadly. How does it work?
Exhaustion has 6 levels, and the effects are cumulative. Certain effects in the game, like forced marches, lack of food or water, or specific spell abilities, can cause a creature to gain levels of exhaustion.
What are the effects at each level?
Okay, level 1 imposes disadvantage on ability checks.
Just checks first.
Right. At level 2, your speed is halved. Level 3 makes you suffer disadvantage on attack rolls and saving throws.
Getting serious now.
At level 4, your hit point maximum is halved. Ouch. Level 5 reduces your speed to 0. You're basically immobile.
And level 6.
And reaching level 6 results in death. Simple as that.
How do you recover from exhaustion?
Finishing a long rest removes 1 level of exhaustion. So it takes multiple long rests to fully recover if you've stacked up several levels. The glossary notes that, unlike most conditions, exhaustion levels are specifically removed by finishing a long rest, allowing you to eventually get back to 0.
Frightened condition. Scared of something specific.
Yes. When a creature is frightened of a specific source, it suffers disadvantage on ability checks and attack rolls while that source of fear is within its line of sight.
So if the scary thing is looking at you, you're hindered.
Correct. Additionally, a frightened creature cannot willingly move closer to the source of its fear. They want to get away.
Grappled condition. Being held fast.
The grappled condition is primarily a movement restriction. While grappled, a creature's speed becomes 0 and they cannot increase it.
Can't move. Any other effects?
Yes. Attack rolls made by a grappled creature against any target other than the grappler have disadvantage. So you can still attack the person grappling you normally, but hitting anyone else is harder.
And can the grappler move you?
Yes. If the creature grappling you moves, they can drag or carry you with them, but their speed is halved unless you are tiny, or at least 2 sizes smaller than the grappler.
And how does one grapple another? Is it an attack?
The glossary clarifies the mechanic. A creature typically grapples as part of an unarmed strike action. When you make an unarmed strike, instead of dealing damage, you can attempt to grapple the target.
So you make an attack roll?
No, it's not an attack roll. It's resolved by comparing the grappler's choice of a strength athletics check or a dexterity acrobatics check against the target's contested check, also strength athletics or dexterity acrobatics. So it's a contested skill check.
Okay, athletics or acrobatics versus athletics or acrobatics. How do you escape?
To escape a grapple on a later turn, the grappled creature uses their action to make their choice of strength athletics or dexterity acrobatics check contested by the grappler's check result that established the grapple, or against a fixed DC.
A fixed...
Yes, the escape DC is listed as 8 plus grappler's proficiency bonus plus grappler's strength or dexterity modifier, whichever ability they used for the initial grapple check.
Okay, so you can try to beat their original roll or beat this fixed DC. When does the grapple end otherwise?
The condition ends if the grappler becomes incapacitated, if the grappled creature successfully escapes using that contested check or beating the DC, or if an effect creating the grapple ends, like a spell duration running out.
Okay, that mechanism for escaping is key. Incapacitated condition. This sounds like a big one.
It is. When a creature is incapacitated, they are essentially taken out of the fight temporarily. They cannot take actions, bonus actions, or reactions.
Can't do anything on their turn.
Pretty much. Any concentration they were maintaining is immediately broken. They are also speechless.
Does it affect their initiative if they're incapacitated when combat starts?
Yes. The glossary specifies that if a creature is incapacitated when initiative is rolled, they have disadvantage on the roll. This condition is why effects that cause stunned, paralyzed, or unconscious are so effective they all impose the incapacitated condition as part of their effects.
Invisible condition. What exactly does being invisible mean in terms of mechanics? We know true sight sees through it.
Right. The glossary breaks down the effects. First, the obvious. A creature cannot be seen without the aid of magic or a special sense like blind sight or tremor sense.
Okay, can't be sword.
Second, they are concealed. Creatures that cannot see the invisible creature cannot target it directly with attacks or many spells. Area effects might still hit them, though.
So single target stuff often fails.
Correct. Third, attacks are affected. Attack rolls against the invisible creature have disadvantage.
Harder to hit them.
And attack rolls made by the invisible creature have advantage.
Easier for them to hit others. Sneaky.
Very. However, being invisible doesn't make you undetectable. By other means, you can still be heard, smelled, or leave tracks. A clever enemy might still figure out where you are.
Paralyzed condition. This is a severe state. What does it do?
A paralyzed creature is frozen in place. They are incapacitated, meaning they can't take actions, bonus actions, reactions, can't move or speak. Their speed is 0 and cannot be increased.
Completely helpless.
Pretty much. They automatically fail any strength or dexterity saving throw. Attack rolls against a paralyzed creature have advantage.
And there's something about critical hits.
Yes, critically. Any attack roll that hits a paralyzed creature from within 5 feet is an automatic critical hit.
Ouch. Definitely a prime target for melee attackers. Petrified condition. Turned to stone.
Petrified is the condition of being turned into solid, inanimate substance, typically stone. The creature is incapacitated, cannot move or speak, speed is 0 and cannot increase, and automatically fails strength and dexterity saving throws.
How does damage affect them? Are they super tough?
Yes. While petrified, a creature has resistance and immunity to all damage.
Wait, immunity to all damage?
Let me clarify. The source says resistances and immunities to all damage, but then specifies immune to poison and psychic damage. This likely means they have resistance to all damage types and outright immunity to being poisoned or taking psychic damage. A slight ambiguity, perhaps, but the intent seems to be high resistance, not total immunity to everything.
Okay. Resistance to most things, immune to poison psychic. What else?
Their weight increases by 10 times, making them incredibly heavy. And whatever they were wearing and carrying is incorporated into the new substance, becoming stone too.
Poison condition. How bad is this?
The poison condition gives the creature disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks. It's a straightforward, broad penalty that impairs many core actions. Not as debilitating as paralyzed, but still nasty.
Prone condition. Lying on the ground. What are the effects?
When a creature is prone, they are on the ground. Their movement options are limited. They can only crawl at the usual 2 feet of movement per foot, or spend movement equal to half their speed to stand up.
So standing uses half your movement. How does it affect attacks?
Attack rolls they make have disadvantage. Hard to fight well from the floor. Attack rolls against the prone creature are affected by distance. Attackers within 5 feet have advantage.
Easier to hit them up close?
But attackers more than 5 feet away have disadvantage.
Harder to hit them from range. That's an interesting tactical point.
Definitely. Restrained condition. Tied up or held, yes.
Yeah.
The restrained condition, like grappled, sets a creature's speed to 0 and prevents it from increasing. A restrained creature has disadvantage on attack rolls, and attack rolls against the restrained creature have advantage.
So, bad for them, good for attackers, anything else?
Yes, they also suffer disadvantage on dexterity saving throws. Harder to dodge things when you're tied up. It's a significant state of being held, leaving them vulnerable.
Stunned condition. What does stun do?
When stunned, a creature is incapacitated, cannot move or speak, and automatically fails strength and dexterity saving throws. Attack rolls against a stunned creature have advantage.
Sounds similar to paralyzed, but without the auto crits.
Exactly. It's very debilitating, shuts them down, makes them easy to hit, but doesn't grant those automatic critical hits from melee.
Finally, for the conditions, unconscious condition. Often happens when HP drops to 0.
Yes, or from certain spells or effects. An unconscious creature is incapacitated, cannot move or speak, and is prone. They drop anything they were holding.
Defenseless.
Essentially. They automatically fail strength and dexterity saving throws. Attack rolls against an unconscious creature have advantage.
And the critical hit rule applies here too.
Yes. Like paralyzed, any attack roll that hits from within 5 feet of an unconscious creature is an automatic critical hit. Furthermore, an unconscious creature is unaware of its surroundings, completely out of it.
That's a comprehensive list of how creatures can be affected. Now let's turn to hazards, defined as environmental dangers.
These are things in the environment that can harm or impede creatures, outside of direct attacks or spells from other creatures. The glossary lists burning, dehydration, falling, malnutrition, suffocation, and also ties in damage threshold, water needs, and food needs, which we'll cover under malnutrition.
Let's start with burning hazard. On fire.
If a creature or object is burning, it takes under d4 fire damage at the start of each of its turns. This damage continues until the fire is extinguished.
How do you put it out?
You can typically extinguish the fire on yourself or another creature within reach by using an action. The fire can also go out naturally if it's doused with liquid, submerged, or suffocated, like by covering it with dirt. Stop, drop, and roll might involve an action.
Damage threshold is a rule specifically for very sturdy objects like castle walls.
It is. Damage threshold represents the ability of exceptionally hard or resilient objects. Think fortification walls, adamantine doors, maybe a dragon's scales in some cases to shrug off minor damage. For damage to affect the object's hit points, the amount of damage dealt in a single instance must equal or exceed its damage threshold.
What happens if the damage is less than the threshold?
If the damage dealt is less than the object's damage threshold, it simply has no effect whatsoever on the object. It just bounces off, effectively.
And if the damage equals or exceeds the threshold, does it take full damage then?
This is where the example in the source gets specific. If the damage is equal to or greater than the threshold, the damage is applied. But the threshold value is subtracted first.
So it acts like damage reduction.
Exactly. Let's rerun that example from the source. Object has 9 HP, damage threshold 5. Takes 4 damage.
Below threshold, so 0 damage taken.
Correct. Takes 9 damage.
Equals the threshold. So 9 minus 5, it takes 4 damage.
That's what the example shows, yes. Threshold met, subtract 5 from the 9 damage, object takes 4 damage.
And if it takes 11 damage?
Threshold met.
Yeah.
11 minus the 5 threshold means the object takes 6 damage. So the threshold acts as a flat damage reduction against any single instance of damage that meets or exceeds it.
That's a really important clarification. It's not just does it beat the threshold YN, it's beat threshold AND reduced by threshold amount, Really emphasizes using powerful hits against tough objects.
Definitely. Falling hazard, a classic. How much damage?
Falling is a staple. When a creature falls, it takes 1d6 bludgeoning damage for every 10 feet it falls. Is there a maximum?
Yes, this damage is capped at a maximum of 20d6. So falls from 200 feet or more all deal the same maximum damage, 20d6.
And how do you land? Usually splat.
Unless a specific rule or trait like Featherfall says otherwise, a creature that takes falling damage lands prone.
Is there a way to soften the landing? Falling into water?
The glossary notes an optional rule for falling into a liquid or soft surface. The falling creature can make a DC 15 dexterity acrobatics saving throw. On a success, they take half the falling damage and do not land prone. On a failure, they take the full damage and land prone as usual.
Good ol' acrobatics save. Malnutrition hazard. The hazard of not eating enough. How much food do you need?
This hazard applies when a creature doesn't consume a sufficient amount of food per day. The baseline requirement is typically 1 pound of food per day for small and medium creatures, but the glossary provides a table based on size.
What's the effect of going without food? Starvation sets in.
Pretty much. At the end of any day that a creature goes without eating the required amount of food, it must succeed on a DC 10 Constitution saving throw or gain 1 level of exhaustion.
Leads to exhaustion. Makes sense. And recovery. Just eat.
Any levels of exhaustion gained specifically from malnutrition are removed when the creature consumes the full required amount of food. So eating a good meal fixes the exhaustion from not eating.
What's the food needs table look like for different sizes?
Okay, scales quite a bit. Tiny, 14-pound day. Small, medium, 1 pound day. Large, 4 pounds day. Huge, 16 pounds day. Gargantuan, a whopping 64 pounds day.
Gotta feed your Tarask. Suffocation hazard. Not being able to breathe. How long can you hold your breath?
A creature can hold its breath for a number of minutes equal to 1 plus its Constitution modifier.
Modifier, okay. Minimum time.
There's a minimum of 30 seconds, or 5 rounds in combat time.
What happens when you run out of breath?
Once that limit is reached, the creature gains 1 level of exhaustion at the end of each of its turns as it struggles for air, so you start racking up exhaustion levels pretty fast.
How do you recover from that exhaustion?
When the creature is able to breathe freely again, all levels of exhaustion it gained from suffocation are immediately removed. So catching your breath fixes the suffocation exhaustion instantly.
Finally, for hazards, water needs hazard. Similar to malnutrition, but for water.
Yes, very similar mechanic. A creature needs a certain amount of water per day, also based on size, or must make a DC 10 Constitution saving throw at the end of the day. Failing the save results in gaining 1 level of exhaustion.
Is the recovery different from malnutrition? Seems like dehydration would be serious.
It is, and the recovery is harsher. The exhaustion gained from lack of water cannot be removed until the creature drinks the full required amount of water for that day. You can't just rest it off, you must drink first.
Okay. So water deprivation exhaustion lingers until you rehydrate. What's the water needs table? Same as food?
Yes, it mirrors the food table exactly in gallons instead of pounds. Tiny. 14-gallon day, small, medium. 1 gallon day, large. 4 gallons day, huge. 16 gallons day, gargantuan. 64 gallons day.
So water deprivation is harder to recover from than food deprivation. You need to drink the water first. That makes sense.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground with conditions and environmental hazards. Let's shift back to the specifics of combat, damage, and healing. Starting with the attack roll. The attack roll is one of the 3 types of D20 tests, alongside ability checks and saving throws. It's the dice roll you make to determine if your attempt to hit a target with a weapon, an unarmed strike, or certain spells is successful.
How is it resolved again? Roll D20, add mods.
Right. You roll a D20, add any relevant modifiers like your ability modifier and proficiency bonus if applicable, and compare the total to the target's armor class, AC. If your total meets or exceeds the AC, you hit. Chapter 1 provides more on D20 tests.
And the most exciting result of an attack roll. A critical hit. What happens?
A critical hit occurs when you roll a natural 20 on the D20 for an attack roll. That's the 20 showing on the die itself.
Automatic hit.
Yes. This result automatically hits the target, regardless of their AC or any modifiers involved. The special effect of a critical hit is on the damage. You roll extra dice for the damage.
How many extra dice?
Specifically, you roll the attack's damage dice twice and add the results together, and then add any applicable modifiers like your ability modifier to that total just once.
So if my sword does 1d8 plus 3 damage, a crit is 2d8 plus 3.
Exactly. Double the damage dice, add the modifier once. That's why players love seeing that natural 20. Damage itself is next. Pretty simple concept.
Yeah, seems straightforward.
Damage is the abstraction of harm dealt to creatures or objects, resulting in a reduction of their hit points. It's the core mechanic for injuring or destroying things in the game.
And how that damage is calculated is the damage roll.
The damage roll is the dice roll you make to determine the amount of damage dealt by a successful attack or a harmful effect. You roll the specified damage dice, like that 1d8 for your sword, and add any applicable bonuses, such as your ability modifier, the +3 in your example, or your proficiency bonus if it's a weapon attack or unarmed strike you're trained in and a feature allows it. Chapter 1 details damage and healing.
Damage comes in various damage types. Why is this distinction important? Why not just have damage?
Attacks, spells, and other effects deal specific types of damage, such as fire, cold, or bludgeoning. This distinction is crucial because the game rules regarding resistance, vulnerability, and immunity rely entirely on these specific types.
So resistances depend on the type.
Exactly. A creature might be resistant to fire damage, but vulnerable to thunder damage. Knowing the type is key. The glossary provides a table listing all the common damage types and examples.
Let's go through them for clarity. Maybe give a quick example for each.
Sure. Acid damage, corrosive liquids, like a black dragon's breath, bludgeoning damage, blunt force, like a mace or falling rocks, cold damage, freezing effects, cone of cold spell, fire damage, flames, fireball spell, force damage, pure magical energy, like a magic missile.
Force is interesting. Not many resist that.
Usually not. Lightning damage, electricity, like a lightning bolt, necrotic damage, life-draining energy, often from undead or negative energy spells, piercing damage, punctures, like arrows, spears, or a dagger, poison damage, toxic gases or venom, like a poison dart or snake bite, psychic damage, mind-rending energy, like from a mind flayer's attack, radiant damage, holy energy or searing light, often from divine spells or celestials, slashing damage, cutting objects like swords, axes, or claws, and thunder damage, concussive sound, like the thunderwave spell or an explosion.
That covers the spectrum of harm. Tied directly to those types is resistance. What does it do again?
If a creature or object has resistance to a specific damage type, the damage it takes from that type is halved.
Always round down.
Yes, this halving applies only once to each instance of damage dealt, and you always round down any fractions. So if you take 10 fire damage and have resistance to fire, you only take 5 damage. If you take 5 fire damage, you take 2 damage. 5 halved is 2.5, rounded down to 2. Chapter 1 explains resistance further.
And the opposite is vulnerability. Takes more damage.
Correct. If a creature or object has vulnerability to a damage type, the damage it takes from that type is doubled. Like resistance, this doubling applies only once to each instance of damage. If you take 10 thunder damage and are vulnerable to thunder, you take 20 damage. Chapter 1 also covers vulnerability.
And the ultimate protection. Immunity. Just ignore it.
Immunity is the most powerful defense. If a creature or object is immune to a specific damage type or condition, it is completely unaffected by it. It takes 0 damage of that type, or it doesn't suffer the effects of that condition at all.
Temporary hit points. These provide a buffer, right? Like extra HP.
Sort of. Temporary hit points are gained from certain spells or effects and act as a temporary layer of protection against losing your regular hit points. Any damage you take is subtracted from your temporary hit points first.
So they absorb damage before your real HP. Can they stack? If 2 spells give me temporary HP.
No. There's a specific rule against stacking. You cannot gain temporary hit points if you already have them. If an effect would grant you THP while you already have some, you choose whether to keep your current amount or take the new amount, whichever is higher. You don't add them together.
Okay, take the better amount. Are they healing?
No. THP are not healing. They don't restore lost hit points, and once lost, they cannot be regained through healing effects, only by gaining new temporary hit points from another source. Chapter 1 has more on this.
Unarmed strike. Using your body as a weapon, punching, kicking.
An unarmed strike is an attack made using your body a punch, kick, headbutt, or similar forceful blow. It's resolved using a melee attack roll.
What's the standard damage? Just strength mod.
By default, an unarmed strike deals 1d4 bludgeoning damage plus your strength modifier.
1d4 plus strength. Okay. Can you add proficiency bonus?
If you have training with unarmed strikes, often granted by class features like the monk's martial arts or certain feats, you also add your proficiency bonus to the attack roll and potentially the damage depending on the feature.
Can you do other things with it, like grapple?
Yes. The glossary notes that some feats or traits might allow you to choose a different damage type, or allow you to attempt to grapple or shove instead of dealing damage when you make an unarmed strike. It links to grapple.
Weapon. Pretty self-explanatory.
Defined simply as an object that falls into either the simple weapon or martial weapon category. Chapter 8 details weapons.
And weapon attack. Also straightforward.
This is straightforward. An attack roll that is made as part of an attack using a weapon linked to weapon.
All right, that covers the specifics of combat, damage, and healing, time for spells, and magical effects, starting with the core concept, spell.
A spell is defined as a specific type of magical effect, described and categorized in Chapter 7 of the Rulebook. Spells range in power from level 0 cantrips up to powerful 9th level magic. It's the core of most magic-using classes.
Spell attack, similar to a weapon attack roll.
Very similar, yes. A spell attack is an attack roll made as part of casting a spell that requires you to hit a target, like Firebolt or Ray of Frost. You roll a d20, add your spellcasting ability modifier, like Intelligence for a wizard, Wisdom for a cleric, or Charisma for a sorcerer, and your proficiency bonus. Then compare it to the target's AC. Chapter 7 on casting spells covers this.
Spellcasting focus. What does this let you skip?
A spellcasting focus like a wizard's staff, a cleric's holy symbol, a druid's sprig of mistletoe, is an object that a spellcaster can use to help cast spells. Its main benefit is related to material components.
How so?
If a spell requires material components that do not have a specified cost in gold pieces and are not consumed by the spell, a spellcaster using an appropriate spellcasting focus does not need the specific material components. The focus replaces them.
So you don't need that pinch of bat guano if you have your focus.
Exactly, as long as the guano isn't consumed and doesn't cost anything. But if a spell needs a 50 GP diamond, the focus doesn't help. You still need the diamond. Chapter 7 details this further.
Cantrip. The bread and butter for many spellcasters. What defines them?
A cantrip is a spell of level 0. The defining feature of a cantrip is that you can cast it without expending a spell slot.
Cast it all day long.
Yep. This makes them endlessly repeatable and reliable sources of magical effect or damage. Very important for casters. Chapter 7 provides the list of available cantrips.
Concentration. Many powerful spells require this. What is it exactly?
Concentration is a mechanic required by some spells and magical effects to keep them active after the turn they're initially cast. You have to maintain focus. The effect lasts for its stated duration, or until your concentration is broken, whichever comes first.
How long can concentration spells last?
The maximum duration for effects requiring concentration varies, but common ones are 1 minute, 10 minutes, 1 hour, or sometimes even longer.
Is there something you have to do each turn to maintain concentration, like use an action?
This is a subtle point. The glossary specifies that you must use the concentration action each turn after the initial turn you cast the spell or created the effect, unless the spell or feature specifically states otherwise. This seems to imply an ongoing action cost in the 2024 rules, which differs from previous editions where concentration didn't inherently require an action, just avoiding disruption. This could be a significant change.
Wait, use your action every turn just to keep concentrating. That makes long concentration spells way less appealing.
It would, yes.
Yeah.
Let's double-check that phrasing. Creator must use concentration action each turn after casting. No action required. Okay, the source description itself seems contradictory here. Use concentration action, but then no action required. This is confusing. Let's assume the no action required part is the clarification, meaning you don't spend your actual action slot, but you are considered to be taking a conceptual concentration action, which is what can be broken. That aligns better with previous editions.
Okay, let's go with that interpretation. Concentration doesn't cost your main action each turn, but it's something you're actively doing that can be disrupted. What causes concentration to break?
The glossary lists several key factors. First, casting another spell that also requires concentration immediately breaks your concentration on the first spell. You can only concentrate on one such spell at a time.
One concentration spell only. Got it.
Second, taking damage. Whenever you take damage while concentrating, you must make a Constitution saving throw to maintain concentration.
What's the DC for that save?
The DC is 10 or half the damage you took, whichever number is higher, and there's a minimum DC of 1, though usually damage will make it at least 10.
So a big hit means a harder save. What if you take damage multiple times before your turn?
If you take damage from multiple sources simultaneously, or multiple times before your turn starts again, you make a separate Constitution save for each instance of damage. Multiple saves can really threaten your concentration.
Okay, what else breaks it?
Third, becoming incapacitated or dying automatically breaks your concentration. If you're knocked out, your spell ends. Finally, the DM might call for a concentration save due to disruptive environmental phenomena, things like violent weather, huge waves crashing over you, or maybe being swallowed whole by a monster, extreme distractions.
That's a clear breakdown of a vital mechanic, and tied to it is the magic action. Is this just casting a spell?
Yes, the magic action is what you use when you cast a spell or activate a magical feature or item that requires an action to do so.
Does it interact with concentration?
The glossary repeats the point we just discussed about the concentration action.
Yeah.
If casting a 1 minute or longer concentration spell, must take magic action each turn while concentrating, unless specified otherwise. Again, this phrasing is slightly awkward if concentration doesn't truly cost your action slot. It might mean you use the magic action initially, and subsequent turns involve the concentration action, which doesn't consume your main action. We'll assume the latter based on our previous clarification.
Okay, a bit fuzzy, but the general idea is clear. Magical effect. What counts as magical?
This is simply a definition for any effect that is created by a spell, a magic item, or any phenomenon that the Dungeon Master rules is magical. This distinction is important because some abilities, spells, or items specifically target, interact with, or negate magical effects, distinguishing them from mundane phenomena that might appear similar, like mundane fire versus magical fire.
Ritual, casting spells without slots.
Yes, sometimes. Ritual is a special tag that some spells possess. If a spell has the ritual tag, and you have a class feature or other trait that grants you the ability to cast spells as rituals, like wizards often do, you can cast that spell without expending a spell slot.
What's the catch?
The catch is time. Casting a spell as a ritual takes 10 minutes longer than its normal casting time, so you can't do it quickly in combat, but it's great for utility spells outside of battle. Chapter 7 provides more details on rituals.
Shape-shifting, like a druid's wild shape or polymorph.
Yes, shape-shifting refers to effects like wild shape, or the polymorph spell that cause a creature to change its form. The specific effect that causes the transformation will detail exactly what happens to the creature's equipment, any ongoing effects, conditions, spells affecting them, curses, and so on.
And you change back when it ends?
Generally, yes. When the shape-shifting effect ends, the creature typically reverts back to its original true form unless the effect specifies otherwise.
Attunement. Required for many magic items. Why?
Some magic items require a creature to attune to them before they can fully utilize the item's magical properties or special abilities. Attunement involves forming a bond with the item, usually over a short rest.
Is there a limit to how many items you can attune to?
Yes, a crucial limit. A creature can be attuned to no more than 3 magic items at any one time.
Only 3.
This is a core concept for balancing magic item power and preventing characters from becoming overloaded with too many powerful passive effects. It's detailed in Chapter 6 under Magic Items.
Finally, for magic, illusions. How real are they?
Illusions are spells or other magical effects that create something that seems real but isn't. The glossary describes them as usually insubstantial and weightless, appearing real because they affect the senses. The Dungeon Master describes how the illusion affects the senses: visual, auditory, olfactory, smell, or tactile touch.
Can you tell they're fake by touching them?
Often, yes. Physical interaction with an illusion can frequently reveal its true nature because it lacks substance. However, good illusions might have details that make them seem more real. The glossary provides the example of a visual illusion of a tree casting a shadow or an auditory illusion, creating the sound of footsteps. These details help sell the illusion, but also provide clues that keen observers might pick up on if they investigate.
Okay, that gives us a handle on the magical side of things. Let's move into the environment itself, the objects within it, and the various creatures you might encounter, starting with area effect. How spells fill a space.
Many spells, abilities, and environmental effects don't just target a single creature, they affect a defined space. The descriptions of these effects will specify their area of effect, which typically falls into one of 6 standard shapes.
Let's define those shapes. First, a cone area of effect, like a dragon's breath.
Exactly like that. A cone extends outwards from a point of origin, which is usually the creature creating the effect or an object they are using. The point of origin itself is not included in the cone's area unless the effect specifically says it is.
How is its size determined?
The cone gets wider as it extends outwards, and its width at any point along its length is equal to its distance from the origin. Cones are specified by their length, such as a 15-foot cone.
Gets wider the further it goes. Next, a cube area of effect, like wall of force sometimes.
Could be. A cube area of effect extends outwards from anywhere on one of his faces. Like a cone, the point of origin is not included in the cube's area unless specified. Cubes are defined by the length of their side, for instance, a 10-foot cube.
A cylinder area of effect, like fog cloud, maybe?
Often, yes. A cylinder extends upwards or downwards from the center of a circle. The point of origin is the center of either the top or bottom circle of the cylinder. The origin point is not included in the cylinder's area unless specified. Cylinders are defined by their radius and height, like a 20-foot radius, 40-foot high cylinder.
Emanation area of effect. This one is different, you said. The origin is included.
It is. An emanation expands outwards equally in all directions from a point of origin. The origin point can be a creature, an object, or a stationary point in space. Crucially, unlike cones, cubes, and cylinders, the point of origin is included in the emanations area unless the effect states otherwise. Think of an aura, like a paladin's aura. The effect extends outwards the distance specified from that origin point.
A line area of effect, like lightning bolt.
Classic example. A line area of effect extends in a straight path from a point of origin. The origin point is not included unless specified. Lines are defined by both their length and their width, such as a 100-foot-long, 5-foot-wide line.
And finally, a sphere area of effect, like fireball.
The quintessential sphere. A sphere expands outwards equally in all directions from a single point of origin. For a sphere, the point of origin is included in the area of effect. Spheres are defined by their radius, like a 20-foot radius sphere.
That lays out how those geometric areas of effect work. Now, cover. Protection is key in combat. How does it work?
Cover is the protection provided by terrain, objects, or even other creatures standing between you and an incoming attack or effect. There are 3 degrees of cover, providing increasing bonuses to your armor class and dexterity saving throws.
Does it matter where the attacker is?
Absolutely. These benefits only apply if the obstacle is actually between you and the source of the attack or effect from the attacker's perspective. Something might give you cover from one enemy, but not another.
What are the degrees? Half cover.
Yes. Half cover means an obstacle blocks at least half of your body from the attacker's view. It grants a +2 bonus to your AC and dexterity saving throws. Think low walls, furniture, or another creature.
3/4.
3/4 cover means an obstacle blocks at least 3/4 of your body. This provides a more substantial +5 bonus to AC and dexterity saving throws. Think an arrow slit, or behind a thick tree trunk.
And the best kind, total cover.
Total cover. If you are entirely behind an object or creature from the attacker's perspective, you have total cover. This completely blocks line of sight, and you cannot be targeted directly by an attack or spell originating from the other side of the cover. You're completely hidden behind it. Cover is detailed in Chapter 1 on combat.
Related to visibility, we have different levels of light. Dim light, like twilight or torchlight far away.
Exactly. Dim light creates an area that is lightly obscured. It's somewhat difficult to see in dim light, but not impossible. Linked to lightly obscured in Chapter 1's exploration section.
Darkness, no light at all.
Or magical darkness. Darkness creates an area that is heavily obscured. It's the absence of light. It makes it very difficult, if not impossible, to see without some special ability like dark vision or blind sight. Linked to heavily obscured in Chapter 1.
And bright light, normal daylight.
Bright light is simply normal illumination, where creatures can see clearly without penalties, like direct sunlight, or the area brightly illuminated by a torch or the light spell, also in Chapter 1.
Let's define those obscured conditions. Lightly obscured. What's the mechanical effect?
A lightly obscured area impairs vision. If you're trying to see something in a lightly obscured area, you have disadvantage on any wisdom perception checks that rely on sight. Think of patchy fog, moderate foliage, or the area cast in dim light.
Disadvantage on perception checks. Got it. Heavily obscured. Worse than lightly.
Much worse. A heavily obscured area blocks sight completely. If you're trying to see something in a heavily obscured area, you are effectively blinded for the purpose of that attempt.
Blinded. Wow.
Yes. This is the effect of thick fog, dense smoke, pitch black darkness if you lack dark vision, or solid barriers, linked to darkness in the blinded condition.
Moving on to objects and how they can be affected in the game. Breaking objects, can you just smash anything?
Objects, like creatures, can be targeted by attacks and other effects and can be harmed or broken. The Dungeon Master determines an object's armor class and hit points based on what it is and what it's made of. Objects can also have vulnerabilities or resistances to certain damage types.
Like wood being vulnerable to fire.
Exactly. Fire might be great against wood, but terrible against stone. The glossary provides tables for object AC and HP as guidelines for the DM.
What are some example ACs?
Okay, object AC is based on the material. Cloth, paper, rope is pretty flimsy at AC 11. Crystal, glass, ice is AC 13. Wood is AC 15. Stone is AC 17. Iron or steel is AC 19. Tougher metals like mithril are AC 21. And super tough adamantine is AC 23.
And hit points based on size and resilience. Fragile versus resilient.
Correct. Objects have HP based on size, tiny, small, medium, large, huge, gargantuan, and whether they are fragile or resilient. For example, a tiny fragile object like a bottle or lock might have 2 HP, averaging 1d4. A tiny resilient object like manacles or thin bars might have 5 HP, averaging 2d4.
How about something bigger, like a door, medium size?
A medium fragile object like a barrel or chandelier might have 4 HP, 1d8. A medium resilient object like a sturdy chest or maybe a standard wooden door could have 18 HP, 4d8. It scales up significantly from there.
For very large objects, like buildings, how is destruction handled? Do you track HP for the whole castle?
Usually not. The DM might break them down into smaller sections, each with its own AC and HP, to make tracking destruction more manageable, like focusing on destroying a specific gatehouse or a section of wall. The glossary also reiterates that the DM decides which damage types are appropriate for harming specific objects. You might not deal much piercing damage trying to stab a stone wall, for example.
Makes sense. The definition of object itself, just a thing.
Pretty much. An object is defined as any non-living distinct thing in the game world. Composite structures like buildings or vehicles are considered to be made up of multiple individual objects, linked to breaking objects.
Occupied space. A square with someone in it.
A space on the combat grid is considered occupied if a creature is in it, or fills it completely. This usually applies to creatures of the same size category as the space, or larger creatures filling multiple spaces.
An unoccupied space. Empty square.
An unoccupied space is simply a space that contains no creatures. Easy enough.
Difficult terrain. This affects movement. How much does it slow you down?
Difficult terrain is any space that requires extra movement to enter or move through. Every foot of movement through difficult terrain costs 1 extra foot of movement.
So it costs 2 feet of speed to move 1 foot.
Exactly. Meaning you spend 2 feet of your total speed to move 1 foot across difficult terrain. Moving 10 feet through difficult terrain costs 20 feet of movement. The extra cost is per foot, not per square, importantly.
What are some examples of things that create difficult terrain? Rubble, water.
The glossary provides a list. A space containing a tiny creature or an ally, squeezing past someone. Furniture sized for a creature of the appropriate size. Heavy snow, ice, rubble, or dense undergrowth. Liquid that is shin deep or waist deep. A narrow opening only sized for a creature 1 size smaller than you, and a slope with an angle greater than 20 degrees. Chapter 1 covers exploration and difficult terrain.
Encounter. A fight. Or more than that.
More than that. An encounter is a segment of an adventure that involves one or more of the game's 3 pillars. Social interaction, exploration, or combat. So a tense negotiation is an encounter, navigating a trapped ruin is an encounter, and fighting goblins is an encounter. Adventures are made up of sequences of encounters.
Ally. Who counts as an ally? Just the party.
It's a flexible term. An ally is considered to be a member of your adventuring party, explicit friends, creatures on your side in combat, or any creature the Dungeon Master designates as your ally in a particular situation. Could be a friendly NPC helping out.
Creature. Basically anything alive.
This is a broad umbrella term covering any being in the game world that includes player characters, monsters, or non-player characters, NPCs. Essentially, if it's alive, or undead, and acting in the world, it's probably a creature, linked to creature type.
Creature type. Like humanoid, beast, undead.
Exactly. Every creature in the game has a creature type, typically listed in brackets after their name in a stat block. These types are descriptive tags.
What are the main types listed?
The glossary lists aberration, like mind flayers, beast, animals, celestial angels, construct golems, dragons, elemental fire elementals, fae sprites, dryads, fiend, devils, demons, giant, ogres, giants, humanoid, humans, elves, orcs, monstrosity, owlbears, griffins, ooze, gelatinous cubes, plant, treantons, and undead, zombies, vampires.
Do the types themselves have rules, like all undead are vulnerable to radiant?
Not inherently, no. The types themselves don't have universal rules that apply to all creatures of that type. However, many other rules, spells, or effects in the game do specify that they only affect creatures of a particular type, like hold person only affecting humanoids, or turn undead affecting undead. So knowing a creature's type is often key to knowing how best to deal with it or what spells work on it.
Enemy. Simple enough. The bad guys.
An enemy is a creature that is actively hostile towards you, fighting against you, or is otherwise designated as hostile by the Dungeon Master or the game rules.
Monster. Is this just any enemy creature?
This term refers to any creature controlled by the Dungeon Master. Interestingly, the glossary notes that even if a creature controlled by the DM is benevolent or friendly, it is still technically referred to as a monster in game terms.
So even a friendly quest-giving dragon is a monster in the rules. That feels weird.
By this definition, yes, as long as the DM is controlling it. It's more of a technical term for DM-controlled creature than strictly something scary to fight, linked to creature and NPC.
A non-player character, NPC. How is that different from a monster?
An NPC is essentially a monster that has a personal name and a distinct personality. Setting them apart from more generic creatures or threats, they are characters with individual identities within the story, though still controlled by the DM. Think of the friendly shopkeeper or the recurring villain, linked back to monster.
We touched on it with the influence action, but let's define attitude. How monsters feel about you.
A monster's attitude is its starting disposition towards a specific player character when they first interact or become aware of each other. The three main attitudes are friendly, hostile, or indifferent. This provides the initial context for how social interaction checks, like the influence action, might play out.
A stat block is the block of text containing all the essential game statistics and abilities for a monster or NPC. It's a condensed summary of everything the DM needs to run that creature in the game.
What kind of information is found in a stat block? Everything. Pretty much everything important. It includes the creature's name, size, creature type, and alignment. It lists their armor class, AC, initiative modifier, hit points, HP, and speed, including special speeds like fly or swim. You'll find all 6 ability scores and their corresponding modifiers.
Saves, skills.
Yes. It lists any saving throws or skills they are proficient in, along with their calculated bonuses, which already include proficiency. Any resistances, vulnerabilities, or immunities they have to damage types or conditions are listed. Their senses, like dark vision, blind sight, or tremor sense, and languages they speak are noted.
CR and XP, too.
Yep. The stat block also includes their challenge rating, CR, and the experience points, XP, they're typically worth, and then lists their specific traits, passive abilities, actions they can take, bonus actions, reactions, and any legendary actions they might have if they're a boss monster.
Does it mention how damage is calculated, like average versus rolled?
Yes. The glossary notes that for damage, stat blocks usually show both an average static damage number and the dice expression used to calculate it, Reggie 10, 3d6, for 10 average damage from 3 6-sided dice. The DM can choose whether to use the static average damage to speed things up or roll the dice each time for more randomness.
That's a really comprehensive summary of a creature's capabilities in the game. Okay, we've covered a huge amount of ground, but there's one more section of important terms that didn't fit neatly elsewhere. Let's get through these final few. First, adventure. What is it in game terms?
An adventure is defined as a series of encounters. It's a segment of gameplay where the player characters face challenges, make choices, and the story unfolds through those encounters. Social, exploration, combat.
And a campaign. Multiple adventures.
Exactly. A campaign is simply a series of adventures linked together, forming a longer, overarching narrative or storyline that spans multiple sessions or even years of gameplay.
Challenge rating, CR. This is a measure of a monster's difficulty, right? How accurate is it?
Challenge rating is a summary intended to represent the threat a single monster poses to a party of 4 player characters of a certain level. Generally, the higher a monster's CR, the more dangerous it is compared to characters of a similar level.
But it's not always perfect.
Definitely not. The glossary explicitly notes that the actual threat a monster poses in play can be significantly altered by circumstances, the environment, the monster's tactics, how many allies it has, the party's makeup and resources. It's a guideline, not a guarantee. The Dungeon Master's Guide provides detailed guidance on how to use CR for building balanced encounters.
Difficulty class, DC. We see this everywhere. The number you need to beat.
The difficulty class is the target number that a creature must meet or exceed on an ability check or a saving throw to succeed at the task or overcome the threat. The Dungeon Master sets the DC based on the inherent difficulty of what's being attempted. Easy might be DC 10, hard DC 20, very hard DC 25, etc.
D20 test. This is the core mechanic covering the main roles.
Yes. The D20 test is the umbrella term, encompassing the 3 fundamental types of rolls you make using a 20-sided die. Ability checks, attack rolls, and saving throws. Something in the game's rules must direct you to make a D20 test.
And the DM decides when and why.
The Dungeon Master's role is to determine the specific circumstances under which a test is warranted and what the outcome of success or failure means. Chapter 1 provides the detailed rules for D20 tests.
Expertise. A feature that makes you exceptionally good at something. How does it work?
Expertise is a feature, often granted by classes like Rogue or Bard or certain feats, that allows a creature to double their proficiency bonus for specific skills or tools.
Double proficiency, that's huge.
It is. When you have expertise in a skill or tool and make a D20 test using it, you add your proficiency bonus to the roll twice. It makes you incredibly reliable in those areas.
Can you get expertise multiple times in the same skill?
No. The glossary notes that you cannot gain expertise multiple times in the same skill or tool. The benefit doesn't stack further. Chapter 1 covers proficiency broadly.
Experience points, XP. How characters get stronger, level up.
Experience points are awarded to characters for overcoming challenges, defeating monsters, completing quests, navigating difficult situations, achieving story goals. As characters accumulate XP, they reach thresholds that allow them to advance in level, gaining new abilities and improving their capabilities.
Who decides how much XP to give?
The Dungeon Master's Guide offers guidance on how to award XP, often based on monster CR or encounter difficulty, or sometimes using milestone leveling instead of XP tracking. Chapter 2 details level advancement.
Heroic inspiration. What's this? A reroll.
Heroic inspiration is a feature player characters can gain, often awarded by the DM for cool role-playing or clever ideas. If you have heroic inspiration, you can spend it immediately after you roll any die, attack, save, check, damage, to re-roll that die.
Do you have to take the new roll?
Yes, you must use the result of the new roll, even if it's worse than the original. High risk, high reward.
Can you give it away?
Yes. You can also lose heroic inspiration if you give it to another player character who doesn't currently have it. Share the love.
A great tool for when a roll really matters. Passive perception, what you notice without trying.
Exactly. Passive perception is a score representing a creature's general awareness of their surroundings without actively making a wisdom perception check. It's what they notice automatically, often used by the DM to spot hidden things like traps or ambushes.
How is it calculated? 10 plus perception bonus.
Typically, yes. Your passive perception score is 10 plus your wisdom perception bonus, which includes your wisdom modifier or proficiency bonus if proficient.
And how does advantage or disadvantage on perception checks affect it? Does that change the passive score?
It does. This is a key rule. If you have advantage on wisdom perception checks, maybe from a magic item or feature, you gain a +5 bonus to your passive perception score. If you have disadvantage, maybe you're distracted or in dim light without dark vision, you suffer a Mecha 5 penalty to your passive perception.
So advantage, disadvantage on the active check directly impacts the passive score by +/-5.
Correct. The glossary example illustrates this. A character with a +4 perception bonus has a passive perception of 14, 10 plus 4. With advantage on perception, their passive perception becomes 19, 14 plus 5. With disadvantage, it becomes 9, 14 to 5. Huge difference.
Per day. How often is per day?
If a rule states that you can use something a certain number of times per day, this means you regain all expended uses of that ability or resource when you finish a long rest, unless the rule specifically states otherwise, like regaining on a short rest.
Possession, like ghosts taking over bodies.
Could be. Some effects allow one creature, often a spirit or other entity, to possess another creature. The effect granting the possession specifies the degree of control the possessing entity has over the target creature's body and actions.
How do you end it?
Effects like the protection from evil and good spell, or the dispel evil and good spell, are often listed as ways to end possession. Exorcism in a can.
Proficiency. We've mentioned this a lot. It's just being trained.
Proficiency is the state of having training or skill in something. This could be a skill like acrobatics, a saving throw type like constitution saves, a weapon category like martial weapons, or a tool set like these tools. If you are proficient with something, you add your proficiency bonus to any D20 test you make using that thing. Chapter 1 defines proficiency and lists the bonus amount by level.
Round down. An important rule for math in D&D, always ignore fractions.
This is a general mathematical rule for the game. Whenever you divide or multiply a number as part of a game calculation, and the result includes a fraction, you ignore the fraction. Always round down.
So half of 5 is 2.
Correct. Half of 5 is 2.5, rounded down is 2. Keeps the math simpler.
Saving throw. The third D20 test, resisting bad stuff.
A saving throw is your attempt to avoid or resist the effects of a threat, such as a spell, a trap, or a hazardous environment. You make a saving throw whenever a rule requires you to.
How does it work?
It normally involves rolling a d20, adding your relevant ability modifier, like dexterity for dodging fireballs, constitution for resisting poison, and adding your proficiency bonus if you are proficient in that type of saving throw. Failure typically results in suffering the full effect of the threat, while success often means avoiding or reducing the effect, like taking half damage. Also linked to saving throw and Chapter 1.
Saving throw effect notation. How saves are described in spells or monster abilities.
Yes, this is the standardized way that saving throws against a specific effect are described in stat blocks or spell descriptions. The notation identifies the ability score used for the save, e.g. dexterity save, specifies the difficulty class, DC, that the creature must meet or exceed, and explicitly states what happens on a successful save versus a failed save, for DC 15 dexterity saving throw. On a failed save, the target takes 8d6 fire damage or half as much damage on a successful one.
Very clear format. Simultaneous effects. What happens when things happen at the exact same instant? Who goes first?
When two or more distinct effects occur at the exact same time of the game, whether at the start of a turn, the end of a turn, or in response to a single trigger, the Dungeon Master determines the order in which they resolve if it involves NPCs or the environment.
What if it involves player characters?
However, if the simultaneous effects are happening at the start or end of a specific player character's turn, that player gets to decide the order in which those effects happen to their character. Player agency there.
Size. We've seen this affect carrying capacity and encounter size. What are the categories again?
Every creature and object in the game belongs to one of 6 size categories: tiny, small, medium, large, huge, or gargantuan. Size is important because it determines the space a creature occupies in combat, often represented by squares on a grid, like medium takes 1 square, large takes 4, and is used as a factor in various rules, including carrying capacity, grappling, squeezing, and interactions with objects.
A skill, like athletics or stealth.
A skill is an area of specialization that is associated with one of the 6 ability scores and used in ability checks. Examples include athletics, strength, stealth, dexterity, arcana, intelligence, or insight, wisdom. If your character is proficient in a skill, you add your proficiency bonus to any ability check you make using that skill. Chapter 1 covers skills and proficiency.
Surprise. Getting ambushed. What's the penalty?
Surprise is a state that can occur at the very start of combat if some creatures are unaware that combat is about to begin, usually determined by comparing stealth checks to passive perception. A creature that is surprised suffers disadvantage on its initiative roll.
Disadvantage on initiative? Do they lose their first turn?
Essentially, yes. A surprised creature can't take an action or a reaction on its first turn in the combat, and it can't move until after its turn ends. They basically just stand there for the first round while everyone else goes. Chapter 1 covers combat and surprise.
Target. Who or what you're aiming at.
The target is the creature or object that is intended to be affected by an attack roll, spell, or other phenomenon's effect. The effect's description will specify what kinds of targets it can affect. e.g., one creature you can see, a point within 60 feet, a 20-foot radius sphere centered on a point.
Telepathy. Mental communication. How does it work?
Telepathy is a magical ability, allowing a creature to communicate mentally with another creature within a specified range, without speaking aloud.
Do they need to understand your language?
For the communication to be understood, yes. The creature receiving the message must understand a language that the sender knows or that the telepathy allows. Telepathic contact does not require touching or even seeing the other creature, just being within range.
Who can initiate the conversation? Can the receiver talk back?
Usually, yes. Either the creature with the telepathy ability or the creature being contacted can initiate telepathic communication, provided they both understand a language. The connection ends if the distance between them exceeds the specified range, or if a barrier specified by the telepathic trait blocks the link, like solid lead perhaps. Some traits grant limited telepathy, allowing a creature only to receive messages but not send them or initiate contact.
Finally, teleportation. Instantaneous travel, like Misty Step or Dimension Door.
Exactly. Teleportation is a special kind of magical transport that allows a creature to instantly disappear from one location and reappear elsewhere without physically moving through the intervening space. Oof.
Does it provoke opportunity attacks if you teleport out of melee?
Usually not. This is a key benefit. Teleportation explicitly does not provoke opportunity attacks unless a specific rule for that particular teleportation effect says otherwise.
Do you take your gear with you?
Yes, when you teleport, you typically take everything you are wearing and carrying with you, again, unless the effect states differently.
What if the space you teleport to is occupied, like inside a wall or where someone else is standing?
If the space you intend to teleport to is already occupied by another creature or blocked by an object, you generally appear in the nearest unoccupied space of your choice. You don't just merge with the wall, usually. The description of the teleportation effect will tell you the possible destinations and limitations.
Wow. That was the entire glossary. We went through every single term in Appendix C. That was a marathon.
We did. And that's the power of this list. We've just unpacked the essential building blocks, the core vocabulary, and foundational mechanics of the updated D&D 2024 rules. These terms aren't just definitions in an appendix. They are the words that pop up constantly throughout the rest of the rulebook in spell descriptions, monster stat blocks, magic item properties, and rules for interacting with the environment.
So what does taking this deep dive into the glossary actually mean for you at the table? Why spend, all this time on definitions?
It means clarity and confidence. Understanding these precise definitions is like having the key to unlock the rest of the rulebook. It empowers you to correctly interpret complex spell effects, understand exactly what a monster's trait does, know the specific mechanics of how your character interacts with cover or conditions.
And argue less about rules.
Hopefully. It helps resolve situations at the table faster and with less confusion. When everyone understands what grappled or heavily obscured mechanically means, discussions about rules become much smoother because you're all speaking the same language.
It feels like knowing the precise language of the game also opens up tactical possibilities. You know exactly how far you can dash, what conditions your enemy might impose, or how much damage an object can take with its damage threshold. It lets you plan and react with more precision.
Absolutely. It moves you beyond just a general sense of what things do to a specific understanding of how they function within the game system. And that specific understanding is where clever tactics, creative problem solving that leverages the rules, and even spotting powerful synergies between different abilities really come from. Knowing the exact definition can spark ideas.
That's fascinating to consider. Here's a thought then. How does having such a clearly defined, almost clinical language for game mechanics, like breaking down every condition or precisely defining every area of effect shape, influence the kind of stories that DMs tell and the ways players approach challenges? Does the structure of the language itself steer the potential gameplay experiences?
It's a great question. The precise language provides a very robust framework, right? A set of defined tools. DMs and players then use these tools to build stories and solve problems within that framework. Does the clarity of the tool set enable different kinds of creativity that a vaguer system might? Or does it sometimes limit it? It's something worth mulling over next time you're planning an encounter or building a character. How do these defined terms shape what's possible?
Definitely food for thought. Well, if you found this deep dive into the D&D 2024 Rules Glossary helpful and feel like you've got a better handle on the fundamental language of the game, make sure to like this video.
Yeah, let us know if this helped.
And to keep getting insights like this into D&D and other tabletop adventures, follow the channel Dragons and Disasters. We'll be back with more deep dives soon.